G'day! In this video, I want to have a bit of a crack at developing my figure drawing from extreme angles. So I'm going to be drawing a lot of figures where the camera is not at your traditional eye line level. For this one, I used a figure reference image where the camera was looking down on the figure. The picture was of a good-looking, muscly man holding a spear, or a stick, I guess. And so I sort of interpreted that into this tribalistic, culturally ambiguous character. And I'll be working in just values for most of these so that I can really focus on what's important and not get too caught up in color. For this next one, I thought it might be fun to do a similar angle and slot it into the negative space in the bottom right corner. Although the angle on this one is pretty similar, the subject is obviously drastically different, with this pose being on the more romantic side. And I can't stop myself from ducking back over to the image on the left and trying to fix up the jawline a bit. I haven't said it yet, though I'm sure it's pretty obvious, the perspective is not perfect on any of these. Although hopefully it's close enough where it mostly goes unnoticed. In particular, the perspective is a little wacky around the female figure who is being ballroom dipped. In the reference image, her hips and the backside of her pelvis are very visible, but for some reason, some sort of error that I've made, I couldn't fit it in my drawing. So this next one I've actually already published as a short, but it is one of my favorites and it falls right in line with these studies. I like to stylize the eyes so that I feel artistic. Next, I'll generate this weird background. Not a great angle, but I can work with it. Here's a cool trick. Duplicate the flat white color. Make the top version dark grey, shift the top grey one left, and we have a rim light. Last, I'll just fill in the values. It's simplest for me to just follow the background. Light values to the right, dark values to the left. And that's my perspective figure drawing. Next, I'm drawing another muscly man, but this time he's got guns. My anatomy is really not that solid, so I'm just looking for landmarks and copying what I'm seeing on the reference. And I've accidentally gone a little bit outside of the frame on this one, but I somewhat think that works in my favor because any differences between the reference and the end drawing can sort of be attributed to some sort of close-up camera distortion. At least that's how I'm rationalizing it so that I don't have to go back and change too many angles. I'm working in a bit of a blue tone for this one. I think it's still categorized as working in values because there really is no hue shift whatsoever. And despite what I said, I did adjust the perspective on his pelvis and legs just a little bit. And as I'm wrapping it up, I'm really not the biggest fan of my work on this one, although I think it comes together a little bit in the end when I add the same tone background. As I'm working through these, I have to keep fighting that sensation of failure with every broken line or failed piece of shading, remembering that they're just studies. I'd like to think that if I actually have to render something out flawlessly, I could probably do it even if it does take me a little longer than is actually warranted. Okay, this next one is the most regular looking pose that I've undertaken so far for this figure drawing video. The camera's honestly not doing anything too wacky, although it is shooting from a somewhat low angle. Come to think of it, this might actually be the first low angle shot that I've included, minor as it is. I really like this particular study in its rough line work stage. There's some obvious proportion issues, especially with the left arm compared to the right arm, where one is much smaller. And I wouldn't say I completely nailed the hands either, although certainly I think the pointing hand is pretty good, but I really like the simple line work design that I landed on before I started messing about with value. So now that we are in the value stage, you can see that I had a little bit of difficulty defining the forms of the t-shirt and the pants, but I think I get there in the end. Again, the plan was to do a lot of these studies, so I'm not going to get perfectionist about keeping up with the reference image. Of these three, I'd be interested to know which one you think is the best. I have a real soft spot for how this last one turned out, but I can probably accept that it's not the most impressive technically. Okay, so next I'm going to do a bit of a speed run of some more complex poses, but tone down the shading just a bit so that it doesn't take quite as long for each one to be finished. And in the spirit of pushing the pace a little, let's have some more frenetic music. You can see that I've toned the detail way down on these ones, almost like they're those crash test dummies that you see in safety tests for cars. These were great little action pose practice studies, although I didn't get too creative with the characters themselves, but maybe that's okay. So here I'm sketching from a bit of a weird angle, kind of a cross between a Dutch angle and an upwards perspective that gives the subject a really powerful and impactful presence. Although the Dutch angle might be working against that impact in this one, and obviously the character looking as goofy as he does doesn't help too much either. For the shading, I thought I'd dip back into that blue tone since I'm drawing a muscly boy again, just to keep things a little bit consistent across the video. Plus, I like it. The plan with this one was to attempt to achieve a kind of backlit look. I'd heard that this was a fairly simple way of shading a character where you mostly want to light the silhouette and keep the bulk of the coloring or shading a little darker. That being said, I'm not sure how successful this attempt was, and it's probably something that I want to try again in the future. Okay, here's one from reference that I quite obviously shot myself. I kinda hate this one. It's not just that it's a incredibly goofy caricature of what is clearly me, it's also just kind of not the best. I think that subconsciously, whenever I go to draw myself and I'm not turning it into some sort of character, that is to say just using the reference and extrapolating from there, I subconsciously sabotage whatever I draw and it ends up kind of rough and rotten. But I didn't want to exclude this one from the video because the perspective is very extreme. Probably the most extreme in the entire video. And it is pretty cool to play up that extreme end of foreshortening. Okay, so last we have another one where the camera is looking at an extreme downwards angle on two figures. The figure reference image gave me the impression of a couple who were awaiting imminent destruction, but in my version, I added the confusing detail of making the male figure appear to be some sort of villainous goblin-like character. This is probably the most work I've put into any of these generated backgrounds, with me chopping at it and photo bashing it and drawing over the top of it. It actually took a pretty long time. And last, I add some fairly rudimentary shading to the figures themselves. I can kind of always tell when I'm getting to the end of a period of studying something because I just can't bring myself to keep on going. I had a few more rough sketches in the pipeline for this video, but I think I'm going to call it finished for now. I can save those for the next time I return to the subject with more knowledge and hopefully improved skills. Thanks so much for watching, and if you liked the video, please like and subscribe. Cheers.